S.J. Sindu was born in Sri Lanka and raised in Massachusetts. Her hybrid fiction and non-fiction chapbook, I Once Met You, But You Were Dead, won the 2016 Turnbuckle Chapbook Contest and was published by Split Lip Press. That's the one I'm immediately getting right after the reading, because I already have the other one. She was a 2013 Lambda Literary Fellow. She holds an MA in creative writing from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln and a PhD in creative writing from Florida State University. Her work has been published in Brevity, the Los Angeles Review of Books, the Normal School, Fifth Wednesday Journal, and other journals and anthologies. She teaches and writes in, well, it says in the old bio Tallahassee, but Tampa now, yeah. And Marriage of a Thousand Lies is her first novel. Every other author I've mentioned this event to recently has said something along the lines of, oh, Sindu's great, or, oh, I love Sindu's work so much. Having met Sindu tonight, and having started reading her book this week, I must say, too, that I am now a fan, and I'm pleased to welcome her to Functionally Literate. Please welcome her with me.
Okay, let's see if I can do this. All right. I'm going to read the first piece from the chapbook. And before I do, I would like to thank Burrow Press and Ryan and Jared and Sam for putting this on, and probably a lot of other people I haven't met yet. And for Kristen for reading with me. I don't think we've read together since Lambda, which was like 3 or 4 years ago. So this is very exciting. And we're pressmates. We're both published by Split Lip Press, which is really exciting. So thank you all for being here. This is called SR9. It stings the back of your throat. Something sweet on the top of your mouth, the underbelly of your tongue. Squint through the thick gray air, the yellow haze of safety glasses. This is gunpowder, invading your lungs, combusting into starchy smoke. This was not your idea. Even through the pillow mufflers over your ears, the bangs ring in your sinuses like a metal cup clanged on the bar-like bones of your rib cage. Dusty stone walls hold in the shooting range and play catch with the bullet sounds. Casings roll on the floor, gilded and spent. You want to crouch, hold your arms above your head. You want to leave. What really bothers you is the newness of it all. This should be old news to you, who fancied yourself born into war. You should know the taste of gunpowder as it hits the back of your tongue. Unfamiliar, it's a challenge to the memories you thought were real. Maybe you made them up after all. Maybe you're not the war survivor you thought you were. You were just a kid. Maybe you were wrong. The blue plastic tote weighs down your hands. You set it on the counter of lane 2. The Ruger is black with a silver barrel. Metal warmer than you expected, heavier. Small and smooth, the gold bullets quiver in their styrofoam holder. He shows you how to load them in the magazine. Your breath is shallow. He says, breathe. A bullet like this killed your uncle. You picture his blood glinting in the sunlight, staining his mother's cement porch. You hook a large beige target on the line with clothespins. You send the target backward into the hazy lane, 25 yards. It dances on the line, bounces on the breeze from the vents. Now you doubt yourself. You remember. Once you were at a birthday get-together watching Turtles Can Fly, a documentary about Iraqi war children. Children and field mines are never a good combination. You know this, resulting in acres of small limbs strewn in intricate patterns. You sit through the movie thinking, you don't need this shit. You don't need this shit. You want to go home. You don't need this. If you can say it enough times, then maybe you can convince yourself to leave. But it's your friend's birthday, and you're already buzzed from beer, so you stay. After the film, you lock yourself in the bathroom and throw up. The room is cramped, barely large enough for the toilet and sink. Open containers of makeup, half used and half rotten, dust over the faucets and crawl towards the drain. You're shivering, but the heat in the house is on full blast. Your armpits are sweating, but what do they know, right? They're just armpits. They're just doing their job. The chill is coming from inside, choking your veins as it works itself out, your teeth clattering. But maybe you were just sensitive. Maybe this didn't happen after all. Maybe you overreact. You hold the Ruger in your hands, slide your palm into the curve under the barrel. You hang your finger on the bottom of the trigger. Breathe in, out, hold, pull. The sound is louder than you expect. It vibrates in your eardrums, shakes the dust from the ceiling of your memories. Fire, breathe, fire, breathe, fire. From this end of the gun, you feel different. From this end of things, you can do more than survive. A month later, you're able to watch war movies you never could before. Even when he looks away squeamishly, you squint through the virtual smoke, watch the blood, determined. Bodies explode in geysers, red pixels pooling into sand. The shots no longer remind you of your uncle or of the soldiers who marched through your town. You think instead of the sweet burn on your throat, glittering casings that ring like tiny bells as you push them aside with your foot. So the chapbook is a hybrid essay and nonfiction, poetry, and fiction collection. And it's impossible to tell what's fiction and nonfiction, which people have said is really frustrating. But I think is really important to the spirit of the book. And that it's mostly dealing with issues of war and survival in many different ways, and what it means to interrogate gender, especially in connection to war. The novel is about a Sri Lankan-American lesbian who is in a marriage of convenience to a gay man so that they can pretend to be straight to their conservative Sri Lankan families. And the protagonist's name is Lucky. And I'm going to read a couple of little sections that sort of give you a feel for what the novel is about. Let me tell you something about being brown like me. Your story is already written for you. Your free will, your love, your failure, all of it scratched into the cosmos before you're even born. My mother calls it fate, the story written on your head by the stars, by the gods, never by you. Everyone is watching you all the time, praising you when you abide by your directives, and waiting until you screw up. And you will screw up. I coasted by for longer than most people. Most stray early, dating in high school or wearing the wrong clothes, maybe piercing something they shouldn't, drinking like hell in college. But then they shape up, put on a suit, and go to their big kid jobs in the swanky part of town, play middle management at biotech and engineering firms, or go to med school. They get married to other brown people and pop out some brown kids, buy a nice cookie-cutter house, and everything is forgiven. As long as you follow your directives in the end, no matter how many lies you have to tell. But here's the truth. I'm still lying. So Lucky feels a lot of her closetedness as a physical burden on her body, and it starts to weigh on her after a little while. I was born bone heavy. My marrow dense like stone, calcium fibers spun tight and thick. People say that I shuffle when I walk, but I know I danced beautifully. The pads of my feet are thick from carrying around the heaviness, and they let me slap the ground hard to the rhythm of the drums. I learned early on that I could thrive on the pressure in my heels. Dancing saved me. Every summer in high school, Nisha and I danced Bharatanatyam together. We trained intensely for performances all around Boston, Indian cultural festivals, multicultural school nights, Sri Lankan community events. Most of the girls who danced with us did it because their parents made them. Their bodies refused to bend, their gestures awkward, stiff, frequently offbeat. Nisha and I danced because we wanted to. We isolated muscle groups and trained each part of ourselves to move independently. The head separate from the neck, the chest separate from the stomach, the hips separate from the torso. I was good, but Nisha was better. Our performances used to be the only time I wore makeup and noticeable jewelry. Now, when I put on makeup, I remember Nisha bending close to my face, my chin in her hands, lining my eyes with kohl, and how, when I blinked too much, she would kiss my eyebrow to distract me from the scratching of the pencil on skin. Nisha comes by for dinner, her thin torso swimming in an Indian cotton tunic. She's a good girl in the same ways that Shyama has always been a good girl. Nisha helps Amma heat up food, gets water for everyone, and makes cheerful conversation during dinner. Around her, I slouch even more than usual and forget to sit with my legs closed. Amma hisses at me to sit up straighter, to keep my knees together, to eat without spilling anything or making any noises. Sit up, Lucky, Amma says. I don't know what your husband sees in you. You're like a boy. Nisha giggles and looks down at her plate. She looks like the girls in Bollywood commercials, all perfect makeup and practiced allure. She has a face pinched in the center, her eyes close to a long, straight bridge nose. Amma asks her about her fiancé. He's a good guy, she says, and looks back down at her plate. When we were young, Amma would drop me off at Nisha's house when she went to work. We played in the green space behind her apartment building, replaying scenes from our favorite Tamil movies. Nisha loved movies starring Rajinikanth, a man hero worshipped by most Indian Tamils. Rajinikanth would leap out of burning buildings and beat up 50 henchmen to get the girl in the end. Outside, behind the apartment building, I leapt out of cardboard boxes and climbed trees, beat up imaginary villains, and saved Nisha. She pretended to wear extravagant saris, and we sang duets like they did in the movies. After dinner, Amma and grandmother watched Tamil game shows in the living room while Nisha and I talk in the guest bedroom. The bed sags and tips us toward each other. Nisha looks out at me, out of the corner of her carefully painted eye. I shift in my seat and press myself against the headboard. Cold permeates through my shirt. I can make out a trace of the jasmine perfume Nisha always wears. "How's your husband?" she asks. "How's Simmons?" I ask back. Nisha is on her third post-college program. So far, she's quit pharmacy school and nursing school. Indecisive, or just flighty. "Boring," she says. "I hate living at home." "It must be amazing to live on your own with just you and your husband. Must be romantic." The room is too hot, but my fingers are freezing. I sometimes wonder what it would have been like if we'd both come out in high school, if we would have tried dating for real. But Nisha was afraid even then. Even when we were by ourselves, she'd never acknowledge what it was that we were doing. I'd like to think that I would have come out if she'd been willing, but that's just another lie. Most people think the closet is a small room. They think you can touch the walls, touch the door, turn the handle, and walk free. But when you're inside it, the closet is vast. No walls, no door, just empty darkness stretching the length of the world. Even during our on-again, off-again high school fling, Nisha never stopped pretending to like boys. She had a rotating string of boyfriends, but none that she actually seemed to like or want. She watches the screensaver of the computer and smiles with only her mouth. I sweat cold patches into my shirt, but my skin feels too small. She stares unblinkingly at her knees. "My parents arranged this," she says. "The marriage, I mean. He's from India." "When's the wedding?" I ask. The words feel foreign, unwieldy. My tongue can't wrap around the syllables. "The engagement ceremony is in a few weeks," she says. She draws her knees to her chest. Her lips shimmer with a remnant of pink gloss, most of it eaten away with the meal. I try to remember what it tastes like. "The wedding's in December," she says. This was bound to happen. Nisha's parents have been desperate to find a guy since I got married to Chris. As far as anyone knows, Chris and I fell in love. I tried to tell Nisha once the truth about Chris and me. It was on the morning of my wedding, and I was terrified. But Nisha refused to hear it. She kissed me on the cheek to silence me and left the room. That was 4 years ago, and after that I didn't hear from her. Nisha scoots closer and presses up against my side. I wrap my arms around her. She puts her head on my shoulder. "Do you want this?" I ask. She breathes in and out. I press my cheek against her head, and the words sink in. Nisha is getting married. The wedding's in December. Wedding, married, Nisha. "Sometimes I wish you were a boy," Nisha says. "A wedding that wouldn't be a lie. A true marriage with love and children and nothing extra on the side. It was hard to imagine. And here's the truth. Sometimes I wish I were a boy too." I'm just going to read one last section, and this is a flashback of Lucky meeting her husband Chris for the first time. "Thummels believe that fate is written on top of our heads, immutable, our future stories scratched into our scalps with permanent ink, birth to death. We can't run from it. We can't fight it. We simply accept it. This notion that we're doomed to pay for the sins we committed in our past lives. Before I got married, Amma brought Chris's horoscope and mine to an astrologer who told her we were a 75% match and that all the indicators pointed to our having had a connection in a past life. Amma was thrilled. A match made in heaven, or rather, written on top of our heads as our souls traveled through the cosmos from one life to another. I met Chris in college. He was a lanky boy from India with thick-framed glasses and ruddy skin he hated for its darkness. I met him in a gay and lesbian literature class, and for the longest time I knew him as the other South Asian queer on campus. He was pompous and drove me crazy with the way he turned up his nose at books that weren't part of the British canon, how he refused to look waiters in the eye. We would meet at parties, fight about the meaning of the Vedas or the true class issues in the Kama Sutra. But we didn't become friends until his parents disowned him for being gay. He sought me out at a party, pulled me aside and said, "I told my mother." His chin, thin and sprinkled with sparse black hairs, quivered. "It was so stupid," he said. His grief bent him toward me. He put his forehead on my shoulder, and just like that, we were friends, bonded by our proximity to the cliff, our danger of falling. Thank you very much.